Welcome back to another poker vlog. This is vlog number 4. Today I played a $35 buy-in event. There was about 7 tables, about just under 70 entrants, and today I'm going to show you every hand from that tournament. And apparently when you get a new phone, it factory resets the settings on your meta glasses, so unfortunately I didn't get the video from the first hand, but I'm going to break it down. So we're playing 8-handed. I'm in the cutoff. I have 10-8 of hearts. It folds to me. Blinds are 100, 200, and now min raise here is not really much. It just kind of builds a little bit of a bigger pot. So because no one opened ahead of me, I opened to 400. We get the button in the small blind to call. We go 3 ways to a flop, and I absolutely smash the flop. It comes king, queen, 3, all hearts. Small blind checks me. I see bet 700, not really scared because we have effectively the third nuts. And how many more combos of ace of hearts, x of hearts, and jack of hearts, x of hearts are we going to be up against? We get both players to come along, and the turn comes the 3 of clubs. Even though this seems like a scary card, with this board texture, it's very unlikely any of my opponents have a 3. So I decide to bet out for 1400. We get the button to fold, but the small blind puts in a call, and we're off to a river, which then comes the 5 of hearts. So not really a great card, because now I lose the ace of hearts, or jack of hearts, any combo, and it gets even worse when the small blind leads for 2400. I take my time thinking of what hands would do this with. I don't really know. I kind of feel like I'm beat, so I think about folding, but maybe he has like the 9 or 8 of hearts and just thinks I don't have any hearts. I had a king or a queen, so I throw in the call out of curiosity, and he has pocket 9s with the 9 of hearts. So we pick off. Not really a bluff. He kind of went for value, but anyways, we have the best hand, and we make a good call, and we're going to scoop the first pot we play. So a couple hands after, we scoop a nice-sized pot to start off the night. I look down at a pair of black 3s. I'm going to low jack. Blinds are 100, 200, so I just limp with intention to call or raise. We get the small blind to call, and then the big blind checks. The flop runs out. The 9 of spades, the 5 of spades, and the king of clubs. So I don't really have much intention to put money in the pot, but now that there's anyone else, and it checks around. I thought an opponent went out of line and checked early, but they didn't. Everyone checked. Then the deuce of clubs rolls out, and after checking the flop in a limp pot where there's no aggressor, we see the big blind bet out for 1000. I think it's suspicious, and I think he's probably going to draw after turning equity. So I raise to 2500 to really put pressure on any club draw, or maybe if he has like 3-4 offsuit because he just lumped in. Surely enough, he makes the call. We go to a river, which is the jack of diamonds. So any draw except for queen 10 that I had put him on missed, but here we see him lead out for 2500, and I'm not really thinking about making a hero call because this is value almost every single time, so I just make the fold. Next hand, blinds are still 100, 200. I look down at pocket 4s from the low jack. Under the gun plus 1 limps. I also limp, and if you know me, I hate limping, but with this pocket pair, I'll limp and call a raise if I need to. We see the hijack and button limp. We see the small blind look down at his cards and try to put on a squeeze play to 1700. The under the gun plus 1 to my right loves to limp and then make a call, so he makes the call for 1700 after quite some time of thinking. It's a bit big of a size for me to call, but when another player calls, I kind of think it's the best option to make the call. The hijack also does the same thing and makes the call as well. Then we see the button also make the call. So it was 4-way limp into the raise, and now it's 5 ways of 1700 to a flop. The flop is a pretty good flop for us, actually. It drills 5, 7, 8 rainbow. Now, when we see the small blind to squeeze check, and under the gun plus 1 check, this kind of hits my range because a lot of the other players probably have like overcards, like maybe queen jack if they limp and called, and then the small blind probably could have like ace king, ace queen, ace jack suited. So I lead for 4200 to make it kind of look like I'm repping a set, which we do have outs to, but we don't at the moment, and we have an underpairs for the board. I put on my best poker face to make it look like I have a super strong hand and I'm going for value and I want to play a big pot, which gets the hijack to fold, the button to fold, the small blind initial aggressor to fold, and then sends the under the gun plus 1 who had initially checked into the tank. This guy loves to make pretty impressive hero calls, if I'm honest, But he also knows he still has to face 2 bets on a later street if I get super aggressive and I really have a set, or even a straight or an overpair, which he says out loud I probably have like 9s or something like that. He hints at having an overpair, but I don't think he ends up having that. He's still in the tank. He really doesn't know what to do, and I'm not giving him any sort of hints, no tells, looking straight, not moving my head at all. Hands are in my lap. They're not moved, not shaking. Nothing that can give away information about the strength of my hand. We got the 4 players behind us to fold, and then we finally get to under the gun +1 to fold. He said he had a pair of 5s, which ended up being good. But in this case, he can't call and then face bets on later streets with just a pair of 5s on that board with the way action went. So we make a good read, we scoop this pot, and get back to the stack we had before the hand with pocket 3s. Blinds increase from 100, 200 to 200, 400. I'm in the big blind, and we see under the gun +1 and the small blind limp. I check my option with king 8 offsuit, and we're going to go 3 ways to a flop, which comes Jack, Ace, Queen, Rainbow. So we have a gut shot to the nuts. However, that hope is given up when we see the small blind who had limped lead out for a pot, which is 1,200. At this point, I know we're 30,000 plus deep, but it's not in my best interest to make a pot-sized call on that board, so we just fold because that's the easiest option. The under the gun and cutoff players both limp to me on the button. Blinds are 200, 400. I look down at King Jack offsuit. I feel like if we had King 10, I would just put in the call with 2 Broadway cards. But since I have King Jack, that kind of is the bottom of my range that qualifies for putting in a small raise this early in the tournament. So I raised to 800. We see the small blind make the call. The big blind also wants to play, so he makes the call. We see the undergun +1 limper also make the call. And then, surely enough, the cutoff, who is very aggressive and loves to play a pot, doesn't matter the price, he makes the call as well. So we go 5 ways to a flop, which comes 3, 4, 7, all clubs. We don't even have ace high beat, so I really have no intention at putting in chips in this pot. We see action check to the player in the cutoff, who always takes his time and thinks about his decisions thoroughly. But he ends up checking, and I just check and want to see another card. That card comes the Queen of Spades, which we see the small blind check, and then the big blind ends up checking to the under the gun, who bets out for 2,000. We see the player in the cutoff throwing the chips quickly, and we fold because there's no equity in this pot for us, and I want to just get on to the next hand. We see action fold to the low jack, who limps. I'm in the hijack. I got King Jack of clubs. So with blinds being 200, 400, I decided to make a raise for 3 big blinds to 1,200. Action folds all the way around to the big blind, who then also decides to fold. And then we see the low jack, right? Who is a very big action player, make the call. I kind of joke to him knowing the call is coming. And we go to a flop, which runs out ace, 10, 5, rainbow. He checks to me. I c-bet with a gut shot, and maybe a king would be good. And he makes the call instantly. We go to a turn, which comes the deuce of diamonds. I fire out again for 1,500 to put more pressure on maybe a 5, any 10. Try to rep that ace. He calls instantly. And then the river runs out the ace of clubs. So when he checks once more, I pretty much eliminate ace from this range. I know he likes to get sticky and make a lot of hero calls. But I decided to bet out, which would be a pretty good value bet for an ace for 2,600. He calls us down with king 10. So he ended up having a pair of 10s, and he read right through us. For this hand, I'm in the low jack. Blinds are still 200, 400. I look down at a great hand, king, queen of spades. See, under the gun +1 limp. I decide I want to put in a raise, which most people would do in this position. I raise to 1,200. We get the cutoff to come along. We see under the gun +1 also make the call. And we're going to go 3 ways to a flop. John, please do us a favor and smash this flop for us. Unfortunately, we see the flop come 9, deuce, 7 with 2 hearts, so the wrong suit, and we don't even have like a gut shot. Under the gun +1 checks. I check with no intentions of putting any more money in because people with this table know I like to bluff, get out of line. We see the cutoff, make things easy for us, and he bets out for 2,200. And we also see the under the gun +1 make the call, so we instantly get out the way. After losing multiple hands in a row, I'm not necessarily on tilt, but I'm feeling pretty aggressive. In this hand, I'm under the gun, and I see ace 9 offsuit. I decided to put in a raise for 1,600. Blinds are 400, 800. Only person who wants to make the call is the big blind, who always gives us action if you've been watching the vlog. You go heads up to a flop, which comes the 4 of diamonds, the 10 of hearts, and the 10 of clubs.
I'm gonna let you get a free card.
Player checks. I also check. We go to a turn, which comes the 8 of spades, so no help to us. Ace high is still our best. We see the big blind lead out for 1,600. I make the call with equity still. I don't believe he has a 10, so we're not drawing dead. And the river puts out the 9 of diamonds. So when the big blind checks and I pick up showdown equity, I check back.
River,
and our 9's going to end up being good. The player in the big blind was getting sticky with a 4 and thought he had the best hand, which he did, but the river did him wrong. Right after that last hand, my table breaks, and we get seated at a new table. Blinds are 400, 800. My first hand, I'm under the gun. I look down at ace, jack of diamonds. I put in the raise to 2,000. We get the cutoff to come along. We see the button get out the way. The small blind takes a peek at her cards, but they're no good, so she gets out the way. And then the big blind gets sticky and makes the call as well. With 3 ways to a flop, which comes ace 7-3 with 2 clubs, so we hit top pair. Big blind checks to us. We don't take our time. We bet out for 1,600. A little bit of a down bet. I'm trying to get called by a worse ace to milk for value. Unfortunately, the cutoff does not have a worse ace and gets out the way, and so does the big blind. So we take down our first hand at the new table, and that's a good sign because we were just losing a bunch of hands. This hand was by far my favorite hand of the night. I'm on the button. We see under the gun, cutoff, both limp. I got king, queen offsuit, which is good enough to put in a squeeze play from the button. I raised to 2,400. Small blind and big blind both fold. We see the under the gun limper throwing the 1,600 to make the call, and the cutoff limper does the exact same thing. We're going to go 3 ways to a flop. That flop runs out 4, 10, jack, rainbow. We see the under the gun and cutoff check. We have a straight draw, so we bet out for 3,000 to milk value from any other hand, hoping to smash our hand on the turn. Maybe if we turn a king or a queen, we're still good. We get the under the gun to make the call, and the cutoff follows suit. We go to a turn, which, bang, we drill Broadway. We have the nuts. We see the under the gun continue to check. Cutoff continues to check. I think of a good size to bet out for. The pot's probably about 12 to 15,000. I bet out for 5,000. We see the player in the under the gun's very curious, wondering if that was a good card for him or a bad card. In the end, he ends up making the right decision and releases his cards into the muck. But the cutoff gets sticky and curious and wants to see a river. The river is a great card for us, the 9 of clubs, so it doesn't really bring in a lot of hands, but the cutoff likes it so much that he puts his entire stack in the middle. He doesn't have a lot behind. We have him covered by a lot. I snap him up with the nuts, which this is the absolute dream spot. We make the nuts on the turn, and then on the river, our opponent jams into us, and we have him covered. So not only are we going to scoop this pot, we nearly get a double up. Right after we switch tables, we immediately scoop 1 pot, and then we scoop this massive pot, which is awesome for us. If you love jacking off, watch this next hand. I'm in early position. On the last hand, I just got almost a double up when I made the nuts on the turn and got paid and stacked my opponent on the river. I make a raise to 1,600 after it folds to me. We would have had ace-king offsuit, but unfortunately one of my cards got exposed, so we got a jack instead. We have the player to my left and the big blind to call, and we're going to go 3 ways to a flop. Unfortunately, we don't flop the nuts, but the board runs out jack, queen, 4, rainbow. Not only did we just make middle pair with jack-king off, but we have the betting lead, so I bet up for 2,500, which gets the player to my left to fold, and the big blind folds. This is why you should always play jack-king off. Some people say jacking off is not good for you, but when you knock down the pot, I'm going to take the same hand and play it every time. This next hand gets very sticky. Action folds around to the cutoff, who raises to 3,600. Blinds are 600, 1,200. So the cutoff is making a pretty big raise in lead position, showing pretty strong. I have a big stack, so I asked the cutoff how deep she is, and she's pretty deep as well. But I have a good hand that plays very well post flop, so I make the call for 3,600. Both the blinds get out the way. I'm on the button, so I have the best position. We go to a flop, which runs out the 5 of hearts, 6 of hearts, and the 5 of spades. We have a gut shot to the nuts, and the player in the cutoff already had chips made out for a C-bet, and she bets out for 4,500. I think about my options. I do want to see another card, because if we were to bank a 7, I could probably get an entire stack. So I get a little sticky with chips I just picked up, and I make a donation of 4,500. We go to return, which comes the 3 of diamonds, no help for us. When she instantly fires up for 10,000, I know I'm behind. I knew I was behind the whole time, but I decided to give up. I don't want to call off probably 4th or 5th of my stack, drawing the 4 outs. So we fold, and we're off to the next hand. I'm going to cut off. 2 players limp to me. I have 5, 6 of clubs, so suited connectors. I limp for 1,200. We see the button fold, and then the small blind and big blind also come along. Flop runs out deuce for 8 rainbow. The small blind leads for 3,000. I have a double gut shot, so once action folds to me, I already know I'm calling. We got multiple ways to get to the nuts, so we're off to a turn, heads up, in position, and we bink the 3 of clubs. We have the nuts, which that 3 was evidently a bad card for the small blind. When he checks to me, I have him covered. He only has about 20,000, so like under 20 to big blinds. And my name is All in Owen for a reason. I love to jam, put maximum pressure on my opponents. So I put my opponent all in, and he shows an 8 and makes a very disciplined fold. I decide not to show my cards because I don't want my opponent to know we had a made hand. I want him to think I possibly could have been bluffing, and if we get put in the exact same position later, I'm going to do the exact same thing and put my opponent all in. We're on the 14th hand of the night. We still have a big stack. We have about double starting stack. We see under the gun plus 1 limp for 1,600 with blinds being 800, 1,600. I look down at ace, jack, offsuit. So I decide I need to put in a bet. I raise to 3,600, which gets the hijack to fold, the cutoff to fold. And the button is curious and likes his hand enough to come along to see a flop. So he sticks in the call. The small blind then folds. The big blind folds. And the initial limper under the gun plus 1 comes along for 3,600. So we're 3 ways off to a flop, which is not a very wet board, but it's also not a dry board. It comes 6, 8, 8 with 2 clubs. Under the gun plus 1 checks. I check with no intention to put money in the middle. We do have the ace of clubs, so if we have backdoors, that comes in. But when it checks around and the turn comes to 8 of spades, when the under the gun plus 1 checks me, I throw out a delayed seed bet of 3,000 just to fold out hands that could maybe river a pair, or river technically a full house on the end, which the button decides his hand's no good. He makes the fold. He later told me he had ace-king, so he makes a pretty disciplined fold. We get the undergun plus 1 to make the call, and the king comes in on the river. The undergun plus 1 is up to no good. We see him repeat his cards. He might have a king, but he very well could have an 8 because he limped. He bets out for 20,000. It's an absolutely massive overpop bet. I don't really think a player in this position is bluffing. If he's bluffing, it's a very bold bluff because a flush is no good, so there's no point in betting that. I just make sure there's not really any bluffs in this range. The ace of clubs is no good in this spot, so I can't even turn my hand to the bluff having the nut clubs because it doesn't beat a 6, 8, or a king. I just make the fold, believing the player has a good hand, and we're going to lose this pot. On hand number 15 of the night, I'm under the gun, blinds being 800, 1,600. We finally look at what I would consider premium in pocket jacks. I put in a raise to 3,800, which is not too big, but not too small. We definitely want to put in a raise here because we want to protect our hand because we know there's a lot of overs that can come. 38. We also don't want to make it too cheap where hands that we're ahead of can make a middle pair and we can get paid by milking them with an overpair. In the end, we get the under the gun plus 1 and the small blind to come along. So we go 3 ways to a flop, which we absolutely drill. We drill top set on a jack, 6, 7 board. The small blind checks to us. Sometimes I would check in this spot, 38. But since I play so aggressive, I want someone to not believe me, and I want to get their entire stack. I lead out with the same bet of 3,800, which gets under the gun plus 1 call. but unfortunately the small blind releases her cards into the muck. Since this point in the tournament is still a swing deal, the player on the button actually thinks the hand's over and almost throws away the cards. She takes it back, puts out the turn, which is not very good for us. It's the 5 of diamonds. If a player had like 8-9 for an open ender, they could have just made a straight. Bet out for 5,000, and the undergun +1 folds. Because I like to have fun in these tournaments and I like to encourage people at the table to do so as well, I show my cards. One of the opponents at the table says, "That's a lot of jacks," which it is indeed. Wasn't enough, however. Our opponents didn't qualify, and we didn't get max value, but we still pick up a good sized pot, and we're running pretty well. Blinds are still 800, 1,600. I have about 50,000 in my stack after a lot of big pots I've won. I'm in the small blind. I got 3 of diamonds, so I got suited cards, and technically I can make it straight, even though I wouldn't really have the nut straight. We see the low jack and button limp. We limp as well. The big blind checks his option. We go 4 ways to a flop, which runs out deuce, queen, 10, rainbow. I check to the big blind with no intentions of putting any chips in this pot. However, it checks the button, who after he organizes some stacks, because he doesn't even realize the actions on him, he also decides he wants to check and get a free card. So once he realizes actions on him, he checks. We go to a turn, a free turn. And that turn does not help. It's a 5 of clubs. So we check again, hoping to maybe get a free card and maybe river an 8, get some showdown value. Maybe we can scoop this limp pot. Once the big blind isn't distracted from a player in the table behind us, he looks at his cards, he folds them. However, since it did not cross the line and he thought there was a bet out, technically he just checks. It checks around once more, and we end up rivering an 8. So now that we have showdown value, I just want to check and get the showdown. The big blind, low check, and button all check. And I show up a pair of 8s. And so does the big blind. However, his kicker does not play since there is only 1 undercard to his kicker. So we're going to end up chopping this pot. Not too bad. We get just 1 big blind in profit. But we defended our small blind, and we ended up with the winner. So I'll take it. In this next hand, blinds are 800, 1,600. And we see the king of clubs accidentally gets exposed. I'm on the button. The under the gun +1 limps to me. And I got ace, queen of hearts. So I have the perfect hand to put out a marginal size raise of 3,600, a little over a 2x opening. We get the small blind to come along. The big blind takes a peek at his cards.
Maybe I saved him some trouble.
He doesn't like them. And then we see the under the gun +1 makes the call. We're in a good position. We're going to go 3 ways to a flop. The flop hits our range pretty well when we see the ace of spades comes out on this ace 6-7 rainbow board. So once it checks to me, I bet out for 4,000, targeting a weaker ace or maybe a straight draw. We get the small blind to come along, the undergun +1 folds, and an absolute blank comes out, the deuce of hearts. We actually get donks into by the small blind for 4,000, which donks usually mean draws, but I decided to put in the call because our hand's too strong. Even if we're beat, I still want to make the call to river. River comes the 9 of clubs. So when the small blind decides to check and slow down, he doesn't have a lot left in his stack. So I put him all in. He calls, and he is a weaker ace, ace 10, and we're going to end up knocking him out and scooping this pot. All in is my name after all, and everyone knows I love putting maximum pressure on my opponents, making them go into the tank, and putting opponents into tough spots for the tournament life. Unfortunately for this player, he made the wrong decision, and we get his entire stack. Blinds increased to 1,000, 2,000, so there's only 1, 5, and 10,000 chips in play. Folds to the small blind, who makes the call. I make a min raise to 4,000 just to get the betting lead and rep a somewhat decent hand. We go to a flop, which runs out queen, 9, 7 with 2 clubs. When I get checked to, I just fire for 6,000, and we get an insta fold. Aggression like this is what I always try to do. Even if it's not a lot of chips at stake, it works out in the long run, and we're going to scoop this pot. In this next hand, we get it all in. Blinds are 1,000, 2,000. This is my second hand after break. I'm on the button, jacking off. We see under the gun +1 and the low jack limp for 2,000. When I have the big stack, I'm always going to be aggressive, so I put in the raise to 8,000. We see action fold to the under gun +1, who makes the call, and then the low jack gets out the way and gets her 3,000 back. We're in position. We're heads up to a flop where our opponent checks in the dark. It runs king, jack, 8 with 2 clubs. I jam, putting maximum pressure on my opponent if he has a king or a jack. He makes the call and says he's ready to go home. We show over our top 2 pair, and he shows jack 8 of clubs for a flush draw in middle pair, which he hits the flush draw on the turn, and the river doesn't help us out. Unfortunately for us, our big stack play doesn't work very well because our opponent, who we just went all in with, had the second biggest stack at the table. He has 70,000. I have just under 90,000, and I'm left with only 6,000. Our stack takes a massive hit right after break. I pick up a couple chips from the blinds. I'm going to cut off my queen jack offsuit. Usually I wouldn't jam a hand like this early, but I only have 5.5 big blinds, so I need to either get a flip or get someone to put it in light. Unfortunately, it folds around, and we don't get this opportunity. In this hand, however, we do get the opportunity to go all in. We look down at ace-10 offsuit. We see under the gun +1 limp. I jam for 14,000. We see the under the gun +1 player is pretty excited and is verbally showing everybody he's going to put in the call. So when it folds to him, he throws in his 10K chip, and we're flipping when my opponent has pocket 9s. We go to a run out, which runs 8, deuce, 3, a king on the turn, and a 5 on the river does not help us. And after having such a big stack before break, we bust right after break.